It was Straightsmile Solutions, straightsmilesolutions.com, and let's talk today about restorative options. And I heard a really great podcast yesterday. It was with Vince Kokich Jr. You probably have to search it, but they definitely brought up this whole topic of the missing lateral incisor, which to me is actually very interesting because my daughter's missing one. She had some trauma on it, and she had an impacted canine, which we're bringing in. So we're going to have to restore it. She's a teenager. But they were talking about the different options for restorations for a missing lateral incisor, which most of which I knew, but I definitely learned some new things. So I wanted to kind of talk you through some of the highlights that I heard as well as I know. So a lot of times the decision is made, especially if the kid is too old. You know, it really depends on the bite and how the canine came in. If it kind of came in anteriorly, then you might want to consider canine substitution, which is basically like this. This is a premolar, this is a canine that they've just basically filed down the edge. If there's really nothing wrong with that, especially if there's two. Now, if it's one, sometimes it can look a little funky. So when it's one, I'm a little more cautious. I mean, always if there's an option to retract it and get an implant later, that's great. But I think you really have to have a heart-to-heart with the family, and assuming this is a teenager or a kid, and make sure the implant is really in their budget. And we just did a previous video about timing for the implant. Remember that it's really best in girls to wait till 1920 and maybe longer, and in boys, depending on if they have a class 3 growth tendency, 21 to 25. So that's a long time that they're going to need either a resin bonded bridge or ideally a splinted or bonded retainer and something over it. It's a long time to have something temporary in there, you know. So, I mean, that's an additional fee. You got that fee, as well as a retainer that goes over it, the cost of the implant placement, the cost of the implant crown, and then the new retainer that goes over that. You're talking an additional $5,000 to $8,000 worth of work on top of the ortho. So definitely, I mean, there's been plenty of patients where it could have gone both ways, and I'm just really blunt with them about the experience, what to expect, what's going to cost. And a lot of times, if they have an option to do the canine substitution and do it well, they'll take it just to not have that hassle, even if there is a little bit of a aesthetic issue. I mean, basically what I've told patients is, hey, if there's some imbalance or aesthetic issue, the cost that you're going to be paying for the implant and all these temporary bridges and stuff like that, you could just get 4 to 6 veneers later, you know, if that's an issue. So just things to keep in mind. I mean, you have to also keep in mind if you do canine substitution, though, now that you're moving the premolar, the first premolar into the canine spot, depends a lot on the bite, what type of loading forces they're going to have. A lot of times that means you're going to have to recontour the first premolar just because it's, you know, it's kind of off balance. So there's a lot of things you have to keep in mind. You also have to look at the bone, you know, and see if it's even going to be able to handle an implant. You need to look at the inclination or angulation of the incisors. If they're more upright, it might be better for a Maryland bridge. If it's more tipped, the Maryland bridge may not work. I've heard that just because it can shear off. But you know, and obviously if you're going to do an implant, you have to have the roots really parallel. You have to have good bone. You have to have, you know, both buccolingually and up and down, you know, vertically. Yeah, the roots have to be totally upright. You also have to have a good bite in the front because we can't have the bite too deep, or, you know, and we got to have enough overjet as well. So there's a lot of things you have to keep in mind. You want to make sure if you are doing the ortho for that case that you are working with the restorative dentist. However, if this is a teenager or a kid, you may not have the restorative dentist because this might be 8 to 10 years down the road. And I mean, a lot of things can change in 8 to 10 years. There might be brand new options out there, you know? So tricky. And then of course, retention. If you are thinking about placing an implant, it's always a better idea to do a bonded retention or to do a Maryland bridge temporarily than just a removable flipper or a Essex with a Pontic, because the chance of the roots relapsing is high if you do that. And there is some research studies about that. It runs about 11%. And then you're gonna have to get the ortho done all over again. So hopefully that was helpful. We still haven't fully decided what we're doing with my daughter yet. We're still aligning that canine. Part of me is hoping we can just close the space up and protract the whole upper left segment. Don't know if that's going to be possible. Otherwise, she'll be getting a resin bonded bridge once we're done, and she'll get an implant later. All right, thanks so much.